Willkommen hier auf der neuen Plattform Zoom. Ja. Danke für das kurze Umzählen auf die andere Plattform. Und wie gesagt, wenn wir hier fertig sind, kommen einfach wieder zurück auf die Big Maga Plattform. Da geht es weiter nochmal mit 3 Sessions und noch eine Keynote, wie eben schon mal gesagt. Now, it's my pleasure, after the technical hassle we had, it's still, you know, this new-fashioned cloud stuff, etc. Doesn't work. I never believed in that. Right? Now, it is complicated sometimes, and exactly in the very moment you're needing it, it proves to be complicated. But I'm really thankful for Tim that he was so flexible that he said, we can postpone the keynote to a later hour. And here we are now, and here we can really look forward to his presentation he's going to do with us. Let me shortly introduce Tim. Tim has been a frequent speaker on many conferences. He had also been a speaker on several JAX conferences. I remember in the US, also in Germany, and several times in London at the JAX on conferences. He's a writer, a thinker, an educator, and now he works for Confluent, and he's going to present us something about Kafka in the cloud. It's fantastic. So please welcome Tim Berglund.
Sebastian, thank you so much, and it is wonderful to be speaking at JAX. There we are. Let me get my screen shared here. I can say in the spring, the end of May, I would much rather be in Mainz. And I look forward to being there again. Are we, folks in the back room, are you able to see my screen? Okay, I'm going to assume that that is a yes. I'll keep an eye on the chat in case anything goes wrong. Wonderful, let's get started. So I am, Sebastian was right, my name is Tim Berglund. And I think the first time I spoke at a JAX conference was maybe 2011. So not quite the 10th anniversary, but coming up on it. And delighted to be back. I work now as the Director of Developer Advocacy at Confluent. And I want to talk to you about Kafka and what it's done, and I think where it's going and how it intersects with some big trends. Just kind of really have a few minutes of really what I think are some big ideas and some direction setting. And honestly, just some projects I've been involved in recently that have to do with this. I thought they'd be interesting to share. So let's do that. Now, I do talk to a lot of people about the kinds of changes that Kafka can bring to the way they build systems. Sometimes I'll sit with a group of software architects and whiteboard how to solve problems like building event-driven payment systems or inventory management or something like that. And it's really hard work. It's fascinatingly hard work, because everybody in the room could build that system very quickly if there were a relational database and a traditional application sitting on top of it, right? We could all do that. We've all done it before. It's just not, I mean, everything's hard at the end of the day, but at the architecture level, we could all build the ERD and think about the application and the query. It would just kind of be there, right? But we also all know that that's not going to work, that architecture is not ready for the demands of what the business is expecting from them next. We'll talk about why in a minute. But that difficulty, I sit in those rooms with those people doing that whiteboarding. Prior to the last couple months, I used to sit in rooms with people. Now it's Zoom calls. We'll sit in rooms again. But it makes you wonder, why are we doing this? Like, where is event streaming going? What kind of transformations should we expect from it in the future? And as usual, I want to start by looking at a little bit of history, trying to think about what the drivers of change are. Why, when I'm sitting there, struggling to think of how to do event-driven payments, rather than just using a database like a normal person, why am I doing that? Why am I going through that difficulty? Well, there are a couple drivers of this, I think, okay? And this is such a cliche, I'm even embarrassed to say it, but we have to remember that there was a time not long ago when not everybody had a smartphone in their pocket. Once there was a smartphone in everybody's pocket, then we grew accustomed to things happening right away. Now, the web had already done that a little bit, like you'd get an email notification for a shipment rather than a card that says allow 4 to 6 weeks for delivery. Some of you are old enough to remember that. But once we had smartphones and push notifications on those phones, there really became to be this expectation that things happen right away. I'm going to know right away if something ships. My phone is going to wiggle. Money is going to transfer because I tap on a button. If there's fraud on my credit card or suspected fraud, there's going to be a text message or an application notification right away. And I can say, yes, that SD card that I just bought at that shop in Paris, that was me buying it. Don't worry. I know it looks shady, but it was actually me. True story there of an actual Capital One fraud notification from a few years ago. And you could do that with traditional database-centric applications, but it's not easy. They're really not the right tool for the job. You probably want an event streaming system to do that kind of real-time processing. So this need for real-time analytics nudged us in the direction of Kafka. Well, something else happened. And bonus points, I would ask for hands if I was in the room with you, but I just want you to be satisfied in your own mind if you know the film that this picture is from. Were some psychoactive Okay, looks like I have lost my Zoom connection and I'm going to reshare things. Folks in the back, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Not sure what happened there, but
So
I'm going to.
What is the problem? I just forward YouTube.
Machen wir den Ton aus.
Here we are, back to Space Odyssey. There was a time not long ago at all when building a large monolithic database centric application was the right thing to do. Certainly that's what I was doing in 2005, 2010. That's just what applications looked like. But we found they were difficult to scale, and we started breaking them up into microservices. We all know that story, and I'm not going to give you that whole story again. Sorry, just getting some notifications that maybe some things are wrong on the back end. I'm going to go on. Once we broke our monolithic applications up into services, we had to reconnect the services, right? And so people experimented with doing that through the database. That was a terrible idea. Some people have services call each other synchronously over RPC, some RPC mechanism. That works, but is complex. It has emerged as a successful pattern to have services exchange events, which gives us, again, the need for an event streaming platform. So mobile pushed us towards real-time analytics. We needed Kafka. Complex monoliths pushed us towards microservices. We needed Kafka. So those two things have really driven a lot of Kafka adoption. And there are very, very valid reasons for wanting to do this. And so when we now have to think through event-driven applications and have the difficulty of doing that, you have to remember there are good reasons for this. It's not just because it's cool. It's not just because it'll pad your resume, but it's actually a successful architecture that people are employing. It used to be that services like orders, shipping, and users, just to illustrate this, would call each other synchronously. The problem with that is that if the user service goes down and you want to place an order, well, now you have to deal with that cascading failure, and you can do it. There are ways of doing it, but it's a whole layer of complexity you have to add. What tends to happen more now is that those services simply exchange events through Kafka topics. Those events have all the state that they need and the notification that work has to be done, and the topic keeps a history of all of those events. So you've got the ability to reason about that history, to write new services that reason about that history. Okay, I am being asked to reshare my screen. So how is that? Can you see that screen? Excellent. All right. So real-time analytics and managing complexity gave rise to event streaming. And then this happened, the cloud. So do you remember where you were when S3 and EC2 were first announced? It was in August, EC2 at least was August of 2006. It was a beta service. I think S3 was about 6 months before that, if I recall correctly. And remember how we talked about it? We said, oh, hey, we have elasticity now. Now you just get these servers in the cloud, and when you need capacity, you just spin up more servers and deploy your application to more servers. And when you don't need it, you take them away and it goes away. And it was great, right? It's a really great story. And it was a lie, because the applications I was building in 2006 weren't too darn elastic, right? I had war files that I was dropping into Tomcat hot deploy directories, and I suspect many of you were too. And all of the important data infrastructure since then that has arisen since then, think of Cassandra, Mongo, name your new database, certainly Kafka. All of those now are distributed databases. So they want to take advantage of that notion of elasticity in the cloud. And they've kind of promised elasticity. But again, you have to ask yourself, that's what we said in 2006, 14 years ago, about EC2. Oh, we have elastic applications now. We had nothing of the sort. We just had virtual servers for cheap. You have to ask yourself, can you really look yourself in the eye and say that we're able to take advantage of what the cloud is promising? And I think in many cases, the answer is only sort of. All of these things, including Kafka, were born in a world that had the cloud, but it was still a little bit exotic. So you have these two paradigms coming together. Event streaming. Okay, this is what Kafka does. And this is company I work for, this is what we do. We're real good at that. We think that this is actually a valid architectural revolution and an important new paradigm that many companies will adapt or adopt. And then you've got cloud nativeness. These two things I don't know if they've really necessarily come together in a meaningful way yet. Of course, there are ways to run Kafka in the cloud. I mean, Confluent has had a cloud Kafka service for a year and a half now. Amazon has a cloud. So there are all these cloud services out in the world that run Kafka, cloud databases. But I think we expect more out of our data systems. We expect modern cloud native data systems to simplify the developer experience in a fundamental way. Like, I don't want to think about servers. Do I want to think about Zookeeper? Do I want to even know what a Zookeeper is? If I operate Kafka, I do, but should I have to? These two paradigms, event streaming, cloud nativeness, coming together, I think we've yet to see that really, really land. And I've been working on some stuff recently that's kind of got me excited about where this is going in the future. So I'm a part of a project at work at Confluent called Project Metamorphosis. And we just published a pretty cool demo a couple weeks ago that showed scaling happening in our cloud service. I had like a pretty small load going into a cluster, just like typing some text in to a console producer, and then we turned on 100 megabyte per second load and just zip right up. And like, to do that in real life, you have to add brokers. And those brokers are getting added in the background, and you don't know a thing about it. You don't even know what a broker is. It just kind of happened. So it's cool stuff. There are several other demos that I'm working on right now that I wish I could tell you about because they're even cooler. I can't yet, but they're kind of happening. And that's why this stuff is on my mind, because I'm spending a lot of time on it recently and seeing this notion of the data infrastructure we need, which is event streaming infrastructure, and cloud nativeness. I'm observing these things come together. And it's not a Confluent thing. I mean, that's where I work, and that's sort of the demos I make are all Confluent demos, and that makes sense. But from a pure Kafka standpoint, this is a thing that's happening. And if you're not keeping track of this, if you care about Kafka and you're not keeping track of this, you really, really should. It's called KIP 500. That's Kafka Improvement Proposal 500, which is really like a super KIP that is a container for a lot of other smaller KIPs, the goal of which is to remove Zookeeper. So that QR code there takes you to a podcast that I recorded with a couple of engineers who are core Kafka committers. I think we recorded that last August, back when the world was normal. We've also got a blog post on the Confluent blog from last week. You can look that up easily enough. That's about the same thing. But we really dig into what's hard about removing Zookeeper, what Zookeeper has done in Kafka traditionally, and why it needs to go if Kafka is really going to enjoy a cloud native life. If we're going to get this promise of actual cloud native elasticity combined with the data infrastructure we think we need. I see a comment. Somebody just said we had Erlang. I don't know what that was in response to because I just saw it right now. I think when I was talking about cloud nativeness, Christian, you must have said something about Erlang. Point taken. We did have Erlang. As you know, painfully, not many people were using it. I wish they were. Anyway, removing Zookeeper is very important. You're not going to have a truly multi-region Kafka with Zookeeper in there. You're not going to have a Kafka that scales the way you'd expect it to. Like, what if you want to have millions of partitions? You want to have, hundreds of thousands of topics with 10 or 100 partitions each. That's going to be hard to do with the current Zookeeper-based architecture. So we got to get ourselves free of that. And that work is happening, and it's worth keeping track of. I think, honestly, it's fairly interesting work that it's worth keeping track of to see the progress. It's, I can't really give timelines on things like this because it's a thing that Kafka is doing. And so the Kafka Project Management Committee will make the decisions about when KIP 500 is considered to be finally merged. Could happen this year, could happen next year. We don't really know. You and I can't say, the PMC will say on that. But it's really, really exciting. And it creates the ability for people who are creating hosted Kafkas to really do it in a way that I think is credible. Publishing some demos on elasticity this month as a shameless plug for this project because I'm working on it a lot. I want to put it in front of you. We'll have demos that come out every month probably, and some of them, this view that you're looking at right here with the books behind you and little teddy bear and all that, some of them will be me right here talking about things. So that's a plug for me, and I'm super pumped about this. I really think we're going to be doing some interesting things. Couple other things to mention, though. I'm always worried about what Admiral Akbar has to say about software architecture. And when I work with people and I'm explaining Kafka to newcomers, so this isn't the meeting with the architects building the event-driven payment system, but this is like developers, like, what's a Kafka? Tell us, we know it's important. So I'll get there and I'll tell them and I'll say, well, here's a topic and it orders messages, and here's a producer and here's a consumer, and here's some other details. Here's partitioning and replication. They're like, great. Now, if you just gave people that and they ran off and they built things, what they would do is they would rebuild some things that already exist. And that's the trap that the good admiral is always warning us of. When the community has a valid, tested, broadly deployed solution for data integration, stream processing, schema management, you might feel tempted to rebuild that. You don't want to do that. It's a trap. It's never your job, almost never your job, to build that kind of infrastructure. You're probably trying to build features to deliver to customers, to the business, to create value, to help people, not to solve interesting stream processing problems. So this is another thing that in a good hosted Kafka service, you see those things showing up, like KSQL. Maybe you've heard me talk about this before. There's certainly lots of good videos online about this. We've got great resources online talking about KSQL. It's a stream processing SQL for Kafka. That's available in a hosted way. So you don't have to think about deploying that service and running that server and scaling it out. That stuff happens for you. Kafka Connect, same thing. This is a data integration technology. Very, very tempting to write that yourself because it seems so simple. It's not simple. There's all kinds of edge cases. You would much rather kind of click a button and make that happen. Schema management, I mentioned schema management. Again, that belongs in the cloud. That should be a part of a hosted service that you're not having to think of. Otherwise, if all you had was a hosted Kafka and you had to build all those pieces, that is what the Admiral is warning of. That's the trap. You want to stay away from that if you can. And these things, again, I well, can I say I'm working on demos? I can't tell you what I'm working on demos of, but some of these demos that I'm so excited about might possibly draw on the concept of cloud native behavior in important Kafka technologies like these, like Kafka Connect, like KSQL, like stream processing. And I can't, again, this is a thing can't tell you all the details about, but it would also be nice if you didn't have to just use Confluent Cloud to do that, right? Like what if you wanted to run on premise? You couldn't use the cloud for whatever reason, and you wanted some of those same elastic scalability features. Again, some of these projects I'm involved in, I'm getting to see stuff like that happen too. And what makes me excited about this is like, I was already excited about event streaming. And just as an aside there, as we're wrapping up here, I have been working in Kafka, working for Confluent for a little over 3 years. And when I came to this community, like I knew it was a good idea, but I didn't quite know how good of an idea it was, how important of a paradigm event streaming really was. I'm kind of slow that way. It took me about 6 months to realize, and I'm like, wait a second. This is going to be really big. I made a good decision here. So I accidentally, apparently. But what gets me so excited about this is I already believed that event streaming was big. It's not like you needed to persuade me the cloud was going to be a big thing. I get it, right? But I've just been working on this stuff where I get to see these things align in a really powerful way, where we just haven't had a cloud native full event streaming system happen yet. And as I see all these little things getting ticked off and these demos getting made and writing these scripts and recording these videos, I'm really getting a sense that something cool is happening. And there's a lot to learn, not just, this isn't a Confluent Cloud commercial. It's not just like, okay, Confluent Cloud. That's fine. It's great. Believe me, it is. But as we see these things happen, I am getting more and more insights about what makes cloud native, or what makes data infrastructure cloud native. And I can't spill the beans on all that stuff yet, but I think this is something you should watch and a space you should watch, because whether you ever use Kafka or care about the product stuff side of this at all, I think if you keep track of these demos and watch these videos that we're putting out, there are a lot of lessons you learn about what makes data infrastructure cloud native. So with that, I believe we've already had that because we rearranged the timing. So never mind that slide. I will stick to this one. Keep that QR code up there for you if you want to scan that. Thank you very much for being here and for bearing with us in rescheduling things. Really appreciate your attendance. I hope I can see you in person next year in Mainz. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Tim. And maybe we can have a huge virtual applause for him right now, because it's so silent here. Can we hear something? Oh, yes, this is for you too.
Thank you, Sebastian.
We need that because the silence sometimes sucks, right?
It's what I work for, so. Thanks, man. All right, everybody have a great evening. And Sebastian, I look forward to seeing you soon.
Very, very thankful. And again, thanks for postponing your session. Thanks for being there. And I hope to see you in person at one of the next conferences we are doing, of course. Goodbye, and thank you so much.